very good evening to you. On behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India International Center, we welcome you to this 83rd session in a series which has been running now for nearly 10 years.
Wow.
We have actually completed 10 years this year. You are all well aware of the theme this evening. We have 4 persons belonging to 4 different disciplines to speak. There is Ananya Vajpeyi, who is a social scientist and a public intellectual, if such words do not mean disparagement. Then M.K. Raina, the theatre person. You have K.T. Ravindran, a well-known architect, and you have Bahauddin Dagar, the only Rudraveena player, perhaps, in the Hindustani classical music. So you have 4 different persons, and they are going to talk about the cultural collapse. Now, in the first place, the idea that there is a cultural collapse itself is open to question. There must be many who do not believe that such a collapse is taking place. However, there is the democratic and Indian culture of plurality, dissent, debate, disagreement, which is being undermined in this country today. A culture of uniformity, obedience, compliance, etc. is being actively promoted. Aggressiveness, hatred, lies, violence, murderousness, atrocities, amnesia, misrepresentations of Indian traditions, history, modern thought are dominant in the public discourse, whatever public discourse is permissible. The more specific cultural infrastructure has become either dysfunctional or, look at the state of the academies, or the NGMA, the NSD, Bharat Bhavan, etc. Then knowledge, excellence, creativity, memory are all under almost daily assault. There are others being created by the day, and these others are being pushed out to the margin to a second-grade citizenship, as it were. This is a time of monumental vulgarity. It is amazing how public spaces have also become sites of monumental vulgarity. And this is also quite independent of whatever may be the political climate. There is a reign of mediocrity in classical music and classical dance, to name only 2 disciplines. So we are faced with this. Now, if this is even in a small way true, then we are in a situation of the cultural collapse. But I leave it to our friends. The rules of the game are, each one of them shall speak for about 10 to 15 minutes. There are, of course, speakers who have spoken, so they know how to control their time. I had a teacher in my 9th class when I started public speaking, and he told me once that if you can't say something that you want to say in 10 minutes, you will not be able to say it in 100 minutes. So I suppose that lesson holds good. However, don't feel constrained by 10 minutes. It could be 10, 15, but not more than 15. And then we will either have a discussion among themselves, if they have anything to say about what the other person has said, and then open to the House for some kind of a question-answer session. So there we are. So maybe start with K.T. Ravindran, the well-known architect. And because one of the bigger crises in this country today is architectural. As I said, the monumental vulgarity. K.T. Ravindran. Or you can sit from there.
In spite of my request last night not to place me first.
It is precisely because of that request.
All right, thank you. So, basically, I'd like to thank the Raza Foundation for this opportunity to speak here, because, as you all know, it's one of the most respected forums where you can, in the city, where you can speak in a language which is a language of dissent as well. So thank you for that, Ashokji. Basically, I'd like to extend the issue which was just raised by Ashokji about how we're moving towards a kind of a position of power. Oh, sorry, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So how the whole country's ethos, including the ethos of urbanization and architecture, are moving towards kind of a public posturing of aggression, intolerance, and exclusion. So these, I think, are the three key areas where we need to examine the issues. First thing, to talk about the general change in the climate of thinking in the country. There is a movement towards, in a country like India, which is extremely diverse, and we have 33,000 gods and goddesses, a move towards monotheism. I don't mean to say monotheism in its classical sense, but focusing towards one deity and aggravating that viewpoint at the exclusion of others. So there was, I recall this small book written by Sigmund Freud, which talked about Moses and monotheism.
Yeah.
It was a book in which he theorized that monotheism, whenever it was manifested in the world, wherever it manifested, it went towards more intolerance and more exclusion. Either intolerance in terms by being proactively intolerant, or being exclusionary and therefore being intolerant to those who are outside your exclusive space. So this is, I think, a lesson that we are now beginning to see being played out in our country, where there's more and more concentration towards just one deity, and that deity being represented as the sole source of power, not only power, also of all virtues and values are embodied in that one deity. And this, I think, is a general climate in which even architecture and urbanism is being defined. Since I have only 10 minutes, I'll move very quickly towards a practical example, giving first the example at home in Delhi, where we are seeing the remaking of the Central Vista, which has been ad nauseum in the press, among all professionals, among intellectuals and everyone. But a critical thing that has happened is that, like in all other cases, in all other moves that the current system is doing, it is an insidious movement where you do not notice the change that's being brought in. It happens very slowly over a period of time, and it's built up into a position which actually, throws open many historic discussions. If you look at how other places like Hitler and Shah of Iran and all functioned, you could see that how our whole movement in urbanism is also moving towards that. If you take the example of the Lutyens Delhi area, we have in the Rashtrapati Bhavan the seat of power. We have about 3.5 kilometers away, 3.5 to 4 kilometers away, we have the India Gate, which also had added to it now a war museum. So there is a celebration of violence, a celebration of the militarization of our mindset. Move a little further, and at the edge of the Yamuna, we are going to get a new park and a big new monument, which is yet to be designed, or it's already designed, we don't know, because it happens, it just appears suddenly. There's no public discourse on it. And there will be a new monument towards nationalism. And all these are actually in line with the Rashtrapati Bhavan dome. In fact, designed with the theodolite to ensure accuracy of the line. And the most interesting thing is that finally it goes and culminates in across the river in the temple complex. So you have political power on one end, you have war, and subsequently you have celebration of nationalism, and then you have religion. So we know that these are actually aligned by a theodolite in accurate line, and we know that this is not an accident, because the first object to come about in this line was done in the first NDA time during 1998 and 2000. And the dome of the temple was aligned at that time to the dome of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Okay, this, mind you, it's like 20 years back. Yeah? And this alignment was already established. Now they are simply filling the dots. Yeah? And they are being connected. We have been engaged in a discussion about architectural character, conservation, environment, trees, public space, etc., etc. But all these are incidental to this grand plan. And we know how these very four institutions have been underpinning the earlier regimes of fascism in the world. So this is a very, very insidious move. Yeah? And one more interesting antecedent to this is that in the earlier plan of Lutyens, the alignment was drawn visually towards Jama Masjid. That's Parliament Street goes and hits Jama Masjid visually, blank in the center of it. And then before it reaches the Jama Masjid, bifurcates into two bits. One of them goes and meets with the St. James Dome, St. James Church Dome in Kashmiri Gate. And the other one goes and meets with the square which was never realized, that was called the St. George's Statue Square. And that was to have come about on Shah Jahan's gate, where you have the two elephants. That is the place where that square was planned, it never got built. So the earlier reference was to a church and to the political power of the British. Now that whole alignment is shifted towards Rashtrapati Bhavan being in the focus, or Parliament being in the focus, towards the Akshardham Dome. So there is a pattern in this. This pattern is something far beyond a discourse on architectural style or conservation or environment and public spaces and people's access and so on. It's something else. Yeah? This is the insidious nature of these moves that I'm talking about. I'm giving this as an example. There are similar moves or much worse moves which have happened in Benares, happening in Puri, happening in Ujjain, happening in every other important religious centers in the country. And there's a sheer massacre of the traditional form that's happening, and they are being replaced by completely exclusionary spaces which are terminal ends of what they call corridors. So it's called Kashi Vishwanath corridor. What is the relevance of a corridor to Kashi Vishwanath is actually something that we have to imagine, because the connection is yet to come about. It's under construction. Yeah? So these are very long-term, seriously impacting proposals on the local culture, local community. In Kashi, the whole space is actually surrounded on two sides by huge blank walls, which closes out the city from the Kashi Vishwanath Square. There are no openings on either side. Okay? On one side of the road, you have busy commercial activity. On the other side, you have a blank wall clad in red sandstone. And we all know what people do to blank walls in this country. Yeah? So similarly, if you go to Ujjain, Ujjain, a place of Kumbh Mela, where thousands of people flock through the Mahakal temple into the Chipra river, you have a 2-3 kilometers long wall in concrete. It's already built, isolating the entire settlement from the river edge. And inside this wall is an exclusionary space which has got flyovers and various other kinds of connectivities. They are yet to come up in Benares, but they've already coming up in Ujjain. And it separates people from this public space, which was the most important sacred public space. Ujjain, as you know, was the Kshetradivati of the 12 Jyotirlingas, of which Benares is only one of them. And it was also the place where Varahamihira's 0 point in time was defined. Mahakal itself means, Mahakal also means the man who is the Lord of Time. And it was a burial ground at one time. So Ujjain is an unbelievably complex, symbolically relevant to our culture space. And that has been totally severed by this wall. And inside that you have something like, the olden days, not now. Olden days we used to have this Pragati Mayan exhibitions where you have plaster cast idols and models and so on. The entire place is strewn with those things. In other words, it's become some kind of a cheap spectacle. And that is a place which is the Kshetradivati of the 12 Jyotirlingas of this country. Similarly, in all other places, I've exceeded time, so I'll just stop with this. Yeah. So the point that I want to make is that the kind of collapse that is happening now, as we see, I do agree that there is a collapse, but it's not already collapsed. It is in a slow process of collapsing, insidiously cutting the foundations of our culture, of this country's culture. I'm not talking about, some popular ideas of culture. I'm talking about the conceptual base on which all these cities are actually designed and located. They're not incidentally located in the manner they are in, or they're not morphologically just accidents. They're actually deliberate acts of design. And we have now interventions happening which are completely ignorant of all these principles on which these cities were designed. And what we have instead is axiality. We have big open green spaces, large public plazas leading to a terminal element. Unfortunately, I don't know whether it is deliberate or not deliberate. The people who design those places don't seem to know that these are standard Renaissance European ploys. And these are these ploys employed to now underpin the cultural base of our cities. I'll stop with this. So I think the discussion needs to go, with your kind permission, beyond architecture and come to urbanism and urban design. Thank you.
MK Raina.
Thank you, Raza Foundation. In fact, I sort of one day we sort of met together and they was telling me, did not to think we need to take a stock of this, not only 8 or 10 years of this rule or before that 5 years also what has been happening in culture, because when this government came, they thought, you know, they are going to bring Indian culture. We have lost somewhere. You know, I am reminded because I travel quite a bit. I just come from Kashmir 2 days back. There's a play written by Bahauddin Dagar. It's about the last day of the Mahabharata Great War. When Krishna dies and Pandavas already won, and what they did with their government. They were drunk, they were brutal, they were violent, they were anything. To the extent one brother of Kauravas had taken sides of the Lord, Krishna, that he is on this side and I should fight on the right side. And he is there alone, he has nobody. And these brothers mock him every day and lead him and make him to commit suicide. I see, you know, 72 years of freedom is happening now. I'm from theatre. And I've seen, they have done hundreds of plays none of us know. On forgotten freedom fighters, for example. Not a single writer or a director or a designer of any foundation is ever been asked or involved in this. Money is being spent in, you will not believe, in multi-crores. Money is being taken from institutions of culture and put into this project. And this project is still on. And I thought, at least there will be 2 good plays that will come out of the 72. There is no play. Then there are, already I have come to know through the horse's mouth, there is some committee that has been formed called National Quality Council or something, which is being headed by one person who is from the Reliance, so has come, the great mind has come from there, and they are going to reconstitute the entire systems of the institutions, who will go where and who will go where. Then I will give one. I did recently a play, and I had to fill a form with insidious things he says is very quietly, it's like a quietly underground happening. I had to fill up a form. Is your play political? I don't know what political they mean, and I don't know. Is your play anti-national? Is your play hurting sentiments of, religious sentiments of the people? And I had to sign it. And it all says, if the declaration is correct, you can be prosecuted for it. So all of us who are now there, if we need a license to do a play, we have to sign this document. Now, theatre people, you know, mostly very few are on the line of protest with this, but most of them have been already bought over, really bought over, our juniors, our students. And the mess they have created in one institution, I'll tell you, that's my alma mater, that's National School of Drama. For the last 10 years, teachers have resigned, they have retired, and not a single teacher has been brought into this place. Out of 16 teachers, 10 have, and there are only 6, and others are, you know, made cap, and they have recently gone on a hunger strike, and things are happening. Now recently they conducted 3 times, which is illegal, interviews, proper interviews of the director's post. Recent was 42 people appeared for the interview for this position of Director of National School of Drama. Why? Because some mischief had been done in the RR rules, which I didn't know what it means, recruitment rules or something, that if first it was specialized for theatre people, specialist design. It's no more that. It is, you can have cultural administration if you know, and there's a flood of people coming, and today I came to know they may not take even the 3rd selection board's recommendations. They will extend the directorship of a person who has been given additional charge of running drama school. He is a librarian and Indira Gandhi National School. And when a student goes to him and tells him, sir, I have to, no, I have to go to another job. But so you can understand. And what I see is delays, dismantling, and dwarfing. Because I have a joke about it. They don't want better people. They don't want, people who innovate, creative. They want people from, varied universities. He has also got a PhD from Haryana One University in the Rohtak. So you have got from Harvard, it doesn't matter. He has got MA, his PhD, he's also PhD. They have done it recently. Example, they had to give a post-up teacher for music, which was a handicap reservation seat. And the best boy who was there was PhD in Western music traditions, Indian music traditions. His tragedy was he had done his BSc, not BA. And that was put against him and got somebody else there to put it like that. Another circular that's running in the city is every club, every theater or performance space people have to give at least 3 months sheet of their programs of what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. That can, you have to give. Now, why is it? That's interesting. Recently, there's been a meeting, I think, member of parliament, some opposition people have been also called, they have not gone to Rashtrapati Bhavan. The idea is that we have become leaders of the world. We are G20 chairman. So is the greatest position better than Nehru ever got it? So they are celebrating it in some 400 some theaters. They will celebrate it all over 2 years. So nobody knows this. It's quietly happening. Nobody is talking about it. I thought, at least, we are Sarfiraz, we do other kind of theatre, we criticize, we do. They will do something Indian theatre. They will do some Sanskrit, they will do Kalidas, they will do Bhar, they will do Bahubhuti. They will be celebrating Indian classical traditions. Great gurus will be. Nothing of that happening. It's completely filmy, totally by, garish, tastes are so low, so even a decent person may not even think, I don't want to go there. And we also see there's a very strange assault on the theatre scene all over country. Kashmir, for example, I will, because I have not much time in Kashmir, I've been. Money is flowing like Jhelum River there. Everywhere you see some drama happening, some folk theatre happening, folk everywhere. And who is doing it? They've hired goons, literally, who can't speak for 4 minutes, they can't write a letter even, believe me. I met one of them, he was interested in talking to me something, and he's telling everybody, you want a national award? I'll get it for you. Openly he says that. And they control the entire fund that is being spent by the Lieutenant Governor, and no writer, no performer, no theatre group of any worth is there ever being asked this is happening. And it is again happening, there is no report, there is nothing, it's happening. So I personally feel there was once during emergency, and there was this seminar, I had a special number, where we go from here now, if you remember. That is what is my worry is. I'm doing a play right now, new play, it is based on Tulsidas. And I have to sign, I don't know, we are defining Ram there, Ramcharitramanus and the thing. Where will I land finally? So all of us in a very quietly, not me particularly, but I can see people are getting scared. They have taken a step back, nahi yaar chodo, kya karna hai, leave it. And this is dangerous because the most unqualified, untalented lots are coming and occupying the space, serious space of culture. And that is a big worry. And you see, Katie was talking about the architecture center of Vista. The first building they demolished was Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. And they have gone almost 1 mile down the ground, completely taken out of space. And they have put IGNC today in a hotel where you can't find that space we were working in. And it will keep on happening. I mean, I don't know where we will go, but it is a sad scene, and maybe that little flame has to be kept lit. Sometimes there may be a change, but maybe we may perish also, because this, one thing I want to really, when I'm talking of this government, I'm not excusing the last government either. Seeds were sown there. I have been a victim of emergency, and I know what I had to go through and how I had to run and hide myself, because I had done a play which they had banned. And it was chalk circle of Bertolt Brecht. It was nothing, some Hangama anti-India play. So cultural space was occupied then also. The only thing they were not telling you what to write, what not to do, what to do. Here there's a whole brigade of bhaktas who are rude, who are crude, who have a muscle. You don't agree, they can hit you, and that is the situation today. And yes, there is a collapse. I had not imagined it would be such a collapse. We tried to revive this collapse on Kashmir, and I was working for 20 years, I've been working there. We rebuilt again, and we flowered 20, 30 theatre groups in the rural area. They were doing plays, they were writing plays, writers were with them. It has collapsed now. Again, within a collapse, there's another collapse. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ananya?
Just to break the male stereotype.
I felt that there has to be some other way to approach this subject, except besides as a catalogue of horrors, which we all experience every day in our lives, in our work, especially I think in our creative life, to the extent that many of us have one, in our institutional life, in our collective public culture. And thinking about what I wanted to speak about today, I assume I was invited as an academic or a scholar, and I could tell you things that you already know, just in sort of, summary form, about what is happening to our universities, to our education system, to knowledge, to languages, and so on. But interestingly, while thinking about this, I kept recalling lines from my father, Kailash Vajpeyi's poems. And this kind of happened so many times that eventually I had to sort of find those poems and return to them, and discovered that the poems that I was thinking of were not recent poems or poems he wrote late in life, but poems that he wrote in the 1960s and the 1970s. And that many of the things that we discuss today, many of the emotions that we experience today, many of the kinds of stress and frustration and anger that we feel today because of what is happening to our society, to our culture, to our country, to our institutions, to our values, it's as though an earlier generation had already experienced that same sense of crisis and collapse 50 years ago. Now, that struck me as both shocking and as somewhat reassuring, because in a way it suggests that, crisis is the human condition, and it's always Kali Yuga. From the beginning of history, it's always been Kali Yuga, and that we experience the passage of time and the changing world as a series of losses, as a series of collapsing edifices that we keep sort of moving on from somehow, picking up the pieces and carrying on. So I just thought that rather than, as I said, list various things that news items, lesser known facts about what is happening inside our institutions of culture and the arts. I'd maybe read a few lines and leave you to think about them, because sometimes, as Ashokji knows, poetry can say more powerfully the same thing that would take a lot of talking to convey. Otherwise, it can say it in a kind of pithy and immediate and powerful way. So this is a poem. These are all poems from from my father's first two collections of poetry, which were published in the mid to late 60s, early 70s. The first collection was called Sankrant, and this is a poem called Mans Vriksh, Tree of Flesh. मैं इन सस्ते और अय्याश लोगों के बीच जो सिक्के चबाते हैं और केकड़े की तरह चिपक जाते हैं, रहते रहते सोचता हूँ क्या पड़ी थी ईश्वर को जो बैठे बिठाए मांस के वृक्ष उगाए. This is one of his best known poems, which you'd be happy to know was blacklisted and banned from being read on All India Radio, even at the time. And there was a question in Parliament about it. It's titled Ek Naya Rashtra Geet, a new national anthem. I won't read the whole poem, it's very, very long, but I'll read you the lines that have stayed with me and with many of his readers and people who know his work. एक नया राष्ट्रगीत. 100 करोड़ से ज्यादा लिजलिजे पंजे दलदल में धसे हुए, रीढ़ की जगह एक केचुआ, मुंह पोला, खाली 2 लंबी दाढ़ें, खड़िया मिट्टी की बनी हुई, रिरियाती आंखों में पेशेवर धूर्तता. सिर्फ जनक अंग चुस्त, बाकी सब सुस्त, लस्त, रक्षित, नक्षत्रों लकीरों की भदभद दीवार में पश्चिम की ओर थूथन उठाए, ये मैं हूँ मैं, बहकर आते हुए मल और कूड़े के इंतजार में, खाकी उजाले से ढका मेरा चेहरा पहचानो. Skip ahead a bit. These are the lines that return to me again and again, and in light of what Katie was telling us about the Central Vista, which is something I've also devoted a lot of time to in the last 2 years. हर सुबह मेरे आसमान पर उगता है एक बहुत बड़ा जूता. हर सुबह मेरे आसमान पर उगता है एक बहुत बड़ा जूता, गोल इमारत की छत से उतरकर ये जूता चलता चला जाता है सार्वजनिक जीवन में. हर सुबह मेरे आसमान पर उगता है एक बहुत बड़ा जूता, गोल इमारत की छत से उतरकर, अब ये इमारत दूसरी वाली तिकोन होने वाली है बाय द वे, गोल इमारत की छत से उतरकर ये जूता चलता चला जाता है सार्वजनिक जीवन में. स्टेशन, डाकघर, टेलीफोन घर, बैंक, यूनिवर्सिटी, बंदरगाह, बस स्टैंड पर चलाकर शाम तक किसी कोर्ट में ये जूता यकायक गुम हो जाता है नए छिपे नोट में. जादू है ना, जादू. मैंने बनाए थे बांध जो बह गए, फिस हो गए कारतूस ऐन वक्त पर, चला गया कुछ हिस्सा सबचे के पेट में. जाए मैं क्या करूं, खास तौर पर जब कर्तव्य नहीं विश्वास करता हूं मैं केवल अधिकार में. Another poem I want to read. It's called Pishach Sanskriti. Monstrous culture, I guess, right? Ashok ji? Pishach Sanskriti would be that, right? कितना अच्छा लगता है अब सभी झूठ बोलते हैं. कितना अच्छा लगता है सभी झूठ बोलते हैं. कितना अच्छा है अब सभी घृणा करते हैं. अपरिचय के माध्यम से जुड़ते हैं, अपरिचित बिछुड़ते हैं. कितना अच्छा है अब सब धोखा देते हैं, अविश्वास करते हैं. कुएं से निकलकर कितना अच्छा है सब खाई में गिरते हैं. न कोई रोता है न कोई हंसता है. कितना अच्छा है अब हर कोई हंसता है. न कोई रोता है न कोई हंसता है. कितना अच्छा है अब हर कोई हंसता है. This is also a long poem. I'll read you just the last lines. और चाहे कुछ भी नहीं दिया सभ्यता ने, कम से कम यह तो किया है कि सभी को बराबर अमानव बना दिया है. और चाहे कुछ भी नहीं किया सभ्यता ने, कम से कम इतना तो किया है सभी को बराबर अमानव बना दिया है. And the last poem that I want to read is mainly for its title, and I think everyone here will appreciate it. It's called परास्त बुद्धिजीवी का वक्तव्य. परास्त बुद्धिजीवी का वक्तव्य. अब कल्चर कोलैप्स हो रहा है तो हम क्या परास्त ही हुए ना. ना हमारी आंखें हैं आत्मरत, ना हमारे होठों पर शोक गीत. जितना कुछ ऊब सके ऊब लिए, हमें किसी भी व्यवस्था में डाल दो जी जाएंगे. ना हमारी आंखें हैं आत्मरत, ना हमारे होठों पर शोक गीत. जितना कुछ ऊब सके ऊब लिए, हमें किसी भी व्यवस्था में डाल दो जी जाएंगे. ये भी थोड़ी सी लंबी कविता है, तो इसकी आखिरी लाइनें भी इसी तरह हैं. हमारी परिणति न आत्महत्या है, न जंग लगी हुई आरती. मुर्दा इतिहास की पोली मीनार में हम दो चुंबकों के बीच स्थिर हैं. बुरा लगे यूं भी तो बाहर घसीट कर हमको निर्वात में उछाल दो. बुरा लगे यूं भी तो हमको बाहर घसीट कर निर्वात में उछाल दो. जितना कुछ ऊब सके ऊब लिए, हमें किसी भी व्यवस्था में डाल दो जी जाएंगे. Actually, 3 whole collections of poems are like this, so I could read you many more, but I just want to say that one of the first things that I learned when studying systems of cultural signification, semiotics, rituals, languages, how is meaning shared in communities, how are communities constructed through various forms of signification, right? One of the first things that you are taught is that there is no such thing as the death of culture, right? A culture may end, a form of culture may end. Cultures may not understand one another, cultures may not be similar to one another, but there is always culture, right? There's no sort of vacuum into which we go if a way of life, a way of being, a way of communicating changes unrecognizably. What we go into is still culture, right? But it's a different culture, and we have to figure out whether we can survive it, whether we can adapt to it, whether it has space for us, or whether we will be forgotten and left behind. And in that sense, you could say in a critical way, as many of our friends do indeed say, that many aspects of our dominant culture, even our dominant secular culture, even our dominant classical culture in the arts, etc., many aspects have been exclusionary and have been less than cultured in their attitude, let's say, towards women, or their attitude towards people of minority communities, or those who are marginalized in any way, whether it be caste or class or however you define marginalization. So there are aspects of high culture, of successful cultures, of powerful cultures that are worthy of being discarded, that are worthy of being taken down and replaced with something different, because they have failed in a way to speak to large sections of society, and that's certainly true of our classical arts. That's certainly true, in literature, in music, in dance. That we've had highly elite cultures that have sort of carried the day. And many people would argue that, if that is changing, that's not a bad thing, because maybe different sections of society are now getting to have their say and to express themselves in ways that make sense to them. But that is different, and I'm stopping, Ashokji, from the kind of total sense of being silenced and bulldozed that we are experiencing. For example, again, I think Katie spoke about Banaras, about Kashi, and whenever I've spoken to people who've lived there for a long time, who are actually Banarsi folks who are local, they say that the life of the city is elsewhere. It is not on Assi Ghat. It is not in the Vishwanath corridor. It is not in the cruise tours that are now taking lakhs of people up and down the river that continues to be as polluted as it was. So, in some sense, the real heart of Banaras perhaps remains undisturbed, but also the real problems of Banaras remain unchanged. And people still have to struggle in the same way that they always did, despite all the lights and the glitz and the psychedelic effects and the sound and light sort of shows. Everything has become a show in our country. So we have to think a little more carefully, that's all I'm trying to say, about the fact that processes of collapse and renewal are cyclical, and that some amount of destruction and reinvention is actually necessary and important. So it's not simply a process that is destructive and that is worthy of the sense of alarm that we are collectively sharing today. Perhaps it's also an opportunity. That's what I'm trying to say. Perhaps this is also an opportunity that we may reinvent ourselves and find ways to survive and to flourish despite the kind of circumstances that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Raza Foundation. That leaves us with music. I would just, everybody has spoken very well, but I would just like to get you through what I have seen in life. In 1990, when my father passed away, it was my first concert, and the musician is called the Big Little Lilliput. Mohan Nadkarniji was at my concert, and I played 2 first rags. I'm telling you this because this is where
from where we began and where we are now. And my second rag was not up to the mark. I did commit a mistake, and he called me to the side and he told me, this is not like this. This is the other way around. This is your first concert. I'm letting you go. And because you belong to a tradition, I'm giving you one chance, and because I see some spark in you. So this is the kind of Samaj we were with in 1990. I was in college also at the same time, St. Xavier's, studying arts. And then this change happened. And the change happened first in the newspaper. I used to volunteer at the Jan Fest, and we had a department called PP&P, Press, Publicity and Posters, and I was a part of it. And we used to go to Times of India, Indian Express and the other newspapers, and we used to give advertisements, and we used to have a preview of the concert, and then we used to have a review of the concert. The review was written by eminent music critics like Mohan Nadkarji or some other, Gujarat Samachar Press was there, and other newspapers. Suddenly, what I saw was in 1991, the paper changed from black and white to color paper. You had this peach color paper. Then you came to colored paper. The moment these things happened, advertisements started pouring in. When the advertisements started pouring in, the money started coming into the newspapers. When the money came into the newspapers, the very next year when you went to put an advertisement or something, they had removed the arts page from the newspaper, saying that it did not bring in any money, so there's no point of having it. We also want to make money, was a clear answer given to us, that we want to make money, so we don't want to have arts page, we want to have more advertisements. Slowly the front page became an advertisement page. Then, the next thing was, if you had to write a music review, you had to buy the space. So you had music critics now, of last generation, like Mohan Nadkarni, who had maybe a small space where they could write something, which they stopped doing because they used to have an entire 1/3 of a page to write upon, where they would attend few festivals and come. And now the spaces were bought. When the spaces were bought, the writers changed from music critics to people who were very good in English, who had done English major. So I had a few of those reviews written for me, where the entire review was a 10:11 photograph, and the rest of it was talking nothing about the music. It talked about what I wore, how I spoke, or how did I look, or which family I belong to, but nothing that explained the music, nothing that explained what was played, nothing that as a critic something could be improved, and this guy needs to pay attention to this. So we are slowly taking the focus away from there. Then the next thing they did is they even kicked them out, and they brought in new writers who were under the age of 25, because they wanted the younger generation to buy the newspaper. They wanted to sell a whole lot of newspaper. So they put a lot more pages into it, and then you had students who were under the age of 25 who had absolutely no understanding of the music. They were just beginners who would write about music and write about concerts. And that's where the entire collapse of the music world began, because there was nobody to explain what's happening in the music. A certain form is being played, a certain artist is rendering something for a few hours, you're sitting over there, and nobody writes anything about it. Nobody explains to you how it is. As versus if you see Mohan Nadkarni or Prakash Vadera's reviews in Delhi, it was a stark difference. So then we started misinterpreting art, because we had no explanation for art. So all that was left with art was, if you came to Drupad, it was something very spiritual. If you came to Kya, it was something very flamboyant. And that's all. So we removed it from what it was and put it into a place where it became very exotic. And we faced that problem for a long time. And then this went on further into when the money came in and the festivals happened, then the organizers saw an opportunity. that they could take money from private companies or from other companies and make good publicity for them. Obviously, I mean, I'm not saying before that there were quite a few promoters before also, but now it was only about which artists to sell, which artists not to sell, whom to put down the stage. So you had a ring of artists going around in the same circle of music again and again and again, and people were, and the really good musicians who were, I mean, I had seen, for example, there was Pandit Yashwanth Joshi in Mumbai, who was never looked into, really. There was Sharachandra Arulkarji, who suddenly vanished from the scene. I mean, if these people would appear even then in a music mehfil, the entire audience would be getting, I'm saying hello to them, but they had no space on the stage. They had no space in this kind of a scenario where all this was being done. And then this went on. So every year, I think we went one step down, one step down, one step down, to the point there is no mention of music anywhere. Now it's like, even if you go for a concert, before you begin the concert, the newspaper guys come and ask you, "Aap kya raag baja rahe hain?" And if I say I'm going to play Yaman, he's going to write it over there. He has played a wonderful Yaman, blah, 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 blue, blue, blue. And if I played a Malkosh, the review still stays in Yaman. He doesn't know what's happening. So I refuse to say what I'm playing then. Then, as of recently, culturally, I mean, six of us got selected onto Bharat Bhavan as trustees. And if you look at the other five people, like really eminent people, there was Astad Debu, there was Ghulam Ahmad Sheikh, there was Sham Benigal, there was Gulzarji, and there was Sanjana Kapoor. And these people were put over there so that Bharat Bhavan had a kind of a collapse, and they had to put these kind of trustees to bring it out again. For 2 years, the government was supposed to pick another 3 trustees, which they didn't do. And after 2 years, all these people were thanked for their services, and there was not a single meeting held. Then, even more recently, I mean, 75 years of independence have passed, and none of the universities in India musical universities have produced a musician. Musicians who was at the universities have had to go and learn from some master somewhere privately and then come and perform. Because it is just like 25 rags in the first year, 40 rags in the next year. It is like filling information. Then, even more recently, at the Gwalior Samaro, one of the ministers came into the concert, and right in between the concert, they halted the concert because he had to come and give a speech, which he called it to Tanpura players, sitar players. And then he said, he spoke for 1 hour, and then the concert resumed. So this is the kind of, I mean, this is not now, but this has been going on for last 15, 20 years, and we are going, I think we're just going down the line somewhere. My only take on this is that it is not a particular government that we are fighting. It is not, I mean, the cultural degradation is because I think we are finding it hard to fight stupidity. We have produced a bunch of morons who have no respect or no understanding for what, in what premises they are or what they belong to. That's all. Thank you.
Well, would anyone like to comment or say something out of the 4? No? No. So then, well, you have seen 4 viewpoints. A viewpoint which suggests, one of the things is that this is not something which is happening now. It has happened even earlier. And a point suggesting just as it had happened earlier and we got over, and so maybe there is the chance, what did you say, opportunity in the crisis or something. There are more serious views which say that this is not something which has happened before on such a scale, that there's something deeply insidious, and that the damage being done, the collapse that is being engineered, is far, far deeper and in terms of impact longer than it could be imagined. After all, the emergency lasted for 1.5 years, and it did damage whatever, but it also allowed both the democracy and the country to recover from that damage, etc. Now, so you have a spectrum of views. Now, if you have any questions, raise your hand, ask the question, don't give your opinion. Ask the question, put it as briefly as you can, as sharply as you can, as critically as you are capable of. So please raise your hands and we will. Don't you speak? Yeah. There. Just a minute. Take this mic. Yes. Please stand up. I think we can't see you. Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, if there is a Leviathan, like a huge sea monster wants to scare you. Monster does not want you to speak. If you speak something, the monster destroys you completely. So, what can be done in this kind of situation when you're so scared to speak, when you are being threatened, and we all see our intelligent journalists in jail for infinite amount of time with no hearings, nothing. So this Leviathan, this big monster, how can we face it? How can we exist in such scenario?
Yeah.
Would like to go ahead. Or you also add something.
When you said that about the monster, I just immediately thought about what's happening in Iran.
Hold the mic closer.
I thought about what's happening in Iran. I think zulm ki koi had hoti hai. And there comes a point when people don't take it anymore, and I don't think we've reached that point yet. I think people are still pretty complacent, they're indifferent, they're even compliant. Some people are even celebrating, the Leviathan in our midst. But there will come a time, you can be certain of it, there will come a time that, enough will be enough. And I think what's important is to keep the pot boiling, to keep your critical faculties alive, and to be cognizant that what is happening around you is, in some very deep, fundamental way, not acceptable. I think you're right to point out that, all of us have friends who have lost their jobs, who are being investigated for imaginary crimes, who are spending time in detention, sometimes indefinite time, who've been denied their legal and their citizens' rights, and any of us could be in that position tomorrow as a consequence, in fact, of this very meeting. It's hard to say, but you can see this happening in country after country. I've personally seen it happen in Turkey. We've seen it happen in Egypt. But what we're seeing now in Iran gives hope, in the sense that it's a brutal moment, and it's a moment that demonstrates, the mask is ripped off from the face of the authoritarian state, whether it's authoritarian in the name of religion or in the name of patriarchy or in the name of, anything. I don't think that it can last when things reach that boiling point. And in India, we've always had pushback. We've always had some sort of good sense that has sort of risen to the occasion. And as long as we have some modicum of democracy, I hope that people find ways to express their dissent and their refusal.
Anybody would like to add anything? You.
I'm sorry, Kiki, I spoke too much. Sorry.
Is somebody else wanting?
Can I add something?
Oh yes, please.
Actually, I would like to add something not in continuation to what has just been said, but looking at various other issues that has been brought out in the discussion today. When Ananya said that there are these changes and changes are inevitable, it is necessary for culture to survive through change, etc., etc., or there is destruction of one culture and there is always kind of building of something else. That's actually a well taken point. But the current scenario's problem is that it is fundamentally impacting the political ethos of our country. I think that's the most, So all these different moves that we see towards, it's not just about building and spaces, etc. It's also about an approach to history and how history is being manipulated in a certain way that it finally undermines the political kind of shelter that we have built up in the last so many years. In other words, understanding of history is actually being redefined very overtly and parallelly in institutions, etc., etc. Approach to archaeology is being redefined. But at the same time, what's happening through these physical interventions in all these critical places is that the history is not understood by people who go to, say, for instance, 1 million pilgrims go to Ujjain on single day in the Kumbh Mela. History is not understood by them like we understand on an evidence-based construct in which we have data, we have analysis, and we have deductions from what we see. But it's understood in a very different way. It is actually understood as a combination of mythology, traditions, practices, rituals, and in the case of India also astronomy. So there is a completely different understanding of history, and unfortunately it is that understanding which is at risk of being destroyed. So that, I think, is the most serious question as far as the destruction of culture is concerned, because it's undermining the very way people understand history. And it is also a nebulous kind of enemy, you see, whom you can manipulate in such a way that no one knows that you're actually doing it. People who are victims of that also don't know that they are the victims. They're celebrating it because they don't understand the changes from what to what and how that change qualitatively is impacting the political framework under which we have learned to think. So I think that's where the problem lies. Sorry if I've been too long.
No, it's fine.
Kabir.
Yes?
Thank you for this very insightful panel discussion. There were 4 different perspectives that we heard. One, of course, about the cyclic, that it is part of a process and the culture never dies and it stays on. One about the level of mediocrity which has penetrated in. One about every time it is going a step down. And one about a much deeper level which is beyond one particular domain. I would just like to know from all 4 of you, what next? And what is it as an individual one can do?
I think first you have to acknowledge that we have degraded, really. Second thing is, like we were having a discussion, we have to initiate a dialogue between artists and the people. Right after a concert, I think you have a dialogue about the work. So that will bring in the newer generation. It will get them interested to know what you are, and if you are open to a dialogue with them, they will approach you. Then out of that, you can encourage some people to say, you do this, and learn, and try to write about it, and let's talk about it. I think we have, as far as music and art is concerned, I think you have to get back to criticism. Otherwise, you're empowering the musician and the artist. If we become empowered, then we are going to be demons, because we will do everything we want to do, and you cannot do a damn thing against us. So I think that sense of empowerment has to be taken away from the musicians and the artists. One thing we do at Raza Foundation is Goshti. It's like a talk between different painters and musicians and dancers. So I think those kind of things also have to be encouraged. Time has changed. I mean, people, when they go, they just go for one certain thing and they come back. But there has to be still, there is one festival I know of, the Darbar Festival in London. When you go to attend it, all the musicians are asked to sit in the front 2 rows and attend the entire festival. And all of them sit together, have food, and they discuss about this, that, and what is been played. So if we have to bring, as far as art is concerned, we have to bring that charcha back into, and not empower the people who are practicing it, because otherwise, tomorrow I can say anything, and you will have to agree, and I don't think that should be done. And that's one solution, I think.
You see, in theatre, I would say that it already has started happening, that we are going to smaller theatres where we take the more serious work. And also I've seen a lot of youngsters do come. I mean, I did a small kind of a tryout with, I done a play called Kavira Khada Bazaar mein, and its music at 20-30 years back was very popular. People wanted cassettes. I sat with the youngsters who do the rock music. They are the contemporary youngsters, and this, can we play around with it? I said, okay, we are game. They will rearrange the music. Melody will be the same, folk melodies are part of it, but we'll change the arrangements and the things. And we worked for 1 month on it. We pooled our money. We had no money to do it. And today that has become a very, very successful performance, and the box office and popular presence, and people are asking, when can we do it, when can we come here, and there is this. I think we have been doing it, I mean, I personally, we have to go on with the youngsters. They are much, much brighter in understanding what is happening to them. And they are the people who question, who argue with you. I think we need to create these little labs. It's high time that we create regional labs, we create the little labs, or interact with each other labs. And that is one way of resistance. I would say it's not only to keep the art alive and keep the quality alive, it's also keep the art's purity and its resistance alive politically.
It's on.
Sorry, just to think comparatively a little bit in terms of other countries, because there are right-wing regimes all over the world at this time. I mean, we're not the only suffering country in this regard, at least. And all the major democracies of the world are at a low ebb, in terms of citizens' rights and the legitimacy of the electoral process and all of this. And I often think that, and this is something I discuss very frequently with Ashish, that, he says one of the reasons that you see more resilience in the American courts, for example, or in the American media, or in the American entertainment industry, is because they are simply older. They are the sort of oldest in the democratic world in these modern forms, and that our the penetration these forms in terms of the modernizing of our institutions is still quite a recent and new phenomenon. It's only a couple of generations old. So ironically, the best television ever to come out of the United States has probably come out in this era of the recession and of Trump and of the complete sort of, decimation of liberal democracy in America. Now you want to think about that. Why is that happening and why is that not happening in India? Our television, our cinema, our media, our press is in a state of collapse. It has not even stood up for 1 minute against this onslaught. But here is the United States where, you still have a reliable at least a section of the media is reliable, even though most of the country is in favor of a right-wing party, right? So you want to think a little bit about the time scale needed for certain forms of resilience to kick in. It's like, you haven't been vaccinated enough, and so you're not going to have the immunity. And there are other bodies politic that have sort of built up that immunity against all kinds of things, populism or liberalism or authoritarianism and so on. And I think we got off to an excellent start with the national movement and the kind of taking the plunge in terms of the democratic experiment 75 years ago. So, if we could pull that off, what is the saffron wave? I mean, that's one way to look at it. I'm actually the least optimistic of anybody on the stage, but I'm trying to think for a change, in ways that, allow me to continue to live and not feel the extent of suffocation that I feel, or the desire to run away, which also I feel on a daily basis. Because I think that I can't go on like this. I just cannot go on like this. It's not possible to continue like this. So you have to just find that mechanism. And I do it often by looking at other countries and their experiences. Their political experiences, but their cultural experiences also.
Yeah. Katie, you have the final word.
I'll suggest a very passive way of action. That is being mindful of what's happening around us. I think that mindfulness is transformative by itself. And I would suggest that we pay close attention to what's happening around us and we react in contextually appropriate way within ourselves. That's the only suggestion I have. I know the problem is very, very political, and it's perhaps in a democratic process, only consequential thing to happen to that is actually mass action. But I am suggesting an inversion of that mass action, of being mindful of what's happening around us. And being ignorant of what is happening around us, I think, is a sin. I'll just stop with that. Thank you.
Then give it to me. Give it to me.
Well, friends, with that somewhat inconclusive discussion.
What did you expect?
Times are so bleak, the situation is so dark, that there cannot be any easy solutions, as has been suggested. The first thing is to acknowledge that there is a crisis. Second is to acknowledge that that crisis is hitting you personally, in terms of your values, in terms of your approach, in terms of your reaction with outside world, your social life, your personal life. And three, at the personal level, keep away personally from speaking lies, from giving to hatred, or creating others or treating others as others. Because one of the lessons of literature and the arts is that there are no others, that we are them and they are us. So this lesson of the arts and literature must be kept in mind. Do not fall a prey to any kind of violence, verbal, intellectual, moral, or whatever.
Physical.
Physical, yes. And lastly, continue to speak wherever there is an occasion, with courage, with candidness, with fearlessness. Because fear is being put into your mind, we are living in a surveillance stage, perhaps this will be reported, etc. I don't care. You have to develop a kind of Gandhian nirbhayata. You have to come back to that notion that there's nothing in the world which can make you fearsome, which you fear. Fear your trivial, your tuchapan, which is what is being played upon, which is what is being addressed in a certain way. So forget about fear, but do not forget about others. Forget about your own personal comforts, but do not forget that there are millions of people who live in extreme discomfort. This new system has created more poor, more people jobless than any other system before. So remember all these. Because facts are being hidden from you, concealed from you, do not give in to the spectacular, to the monumental, to the mean and the trivial. Retain personally some sense of human dignity, some sense of being an Indian, some sense of being, after all, a democratic citizen. Thank you very much. We will have another session as and when, and we'll let you know. Some of you who may not have visited, there's a wonderful art exhibition with the name Varnika Bhang taking place in the Sri Dharani Gallery of Triveni Kala Sangam. Do please find time to visit. In times like this, when you have everything around you which you dislike, there's at least art which you can like. Thank you.